African Union. Introduction. The failure of the Organization for African Unity, OAU, to achieve its set objectives outlined in its charter and to meet up with economic and socio-political challenges that confront Africa in the 21st century led to the emergence of the African Union, AU, on the 10th of July 2002 in Durban, South Africa. The AU was established, among other reasons, for the economic development, political integration, and security challenges that the continent is currently faced with. The main purpose of this study session is to let you understand the formation, aims, principles, organization structure, problems, and prospects of the AU. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to discuss the rationale behind the emergence of the African Union, enumerate the aims and principles of the African Union, enumerate the structures of the African Union and their functions, and what are the achievements and challenges of the African Union. From OAU to AU. The history behind the emergence of the African Union can be traced to the defunct Organization of African Unity, OAU, which was established on the 25th of May, 1963, at a conference in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Prior to this time, African states were divided along ideological lines, such as the Casablanca Group, Monrovia Group, and the Brazzaville Group, with divergent standpoints on the future of the continent. These groups further metamorphosed into two: a radical group led by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, while Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa of Nigeria led the moderate group. The radical group advocated for a comprehensive union of African states, while the moderate group wanted the process for political integration to be incremental and stressed the need for economic, socio-cultural, and educational cooperation that will eventually lead to political integration. The compromise between these groups led to the creation of the OAU. The Article 2, Section 1 of the Charter of the OAU stated the organization pledge to ensure the political unity of the continent, and the guiding principle of the organization was the respect for sovereign equality of members and the non-interference of the domestic affairs of members. This principle was retrogressive in that it restricted members not to interfere in the domestic politics of other member countries. This was a major factor that obstructed peace enforcement and the protection of fundamental human rights. This is according to Wolverine in 2004. Therefore, the Council of Ministers and the Assembly of Heads of States could not arbitrate in any conflict among member states when invited by parties in the dispute. The OAU was thus handicapped to the atrocities committed by African leaders during the era of the proxy wars of the Cold War. The OAU failed because of its intense usage of the non-intervention doctrine, inability to nip in the bud massive human rights abuses by African leaders, and illegitimacy or unpopularity of their leaders. Moriti, 2007. Therefore, it became expedient for the Charter to be changed in order to meet up with the challenges of a dynamic world and for improved efficiency and effectiveness of the organization. On the 9th of September 1999, a summit was held in Sirte, Libya, to re-evaluate the Charter. This summit stressed the need for revitalization of Pan-Africanism and more closer ties to African countries, particularly in areas of socio-economic development, political integration, and security. The OAU leaders agreed to draft an act which will usher in a novel organization. On the 11th of July 2000, the AU Constitutive Act was drafted and signed in Lomé. On the 9th of July 2002, in Durban, South Africa, the OAU was formally replaced with the AU, with more emphasis on good governance, socio-economic development, the rule of law, and democracy. Badejo, 2008. The African Union. Article 2 of the Constitutive Act established the African Union on the 9th of July 2002. Its membership cut across all African states except Morocco, which left the OAU in 1984, following the organization granting of membership to the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic that was set up by the independence movement in the disputed territory of Western Sahara. However, Morocco maintains an observer status and enjoys certain privileges in the AU. The AU is made up of 54 African countries, including the newly independent Southern Sudan. It is open to all independent African states. The framers of the Constitutive Act were careful to avoid the mistakes of the past and thus incorporated the interventionist posture in its Constitutive Act with the establishment of viable institutions. Murithi, 2007. Aims and Principles of the AU. Article 3 of the AU Constitutive Act stipulates that the aims of the Union shall be to a. Achieve greater unity and solidarity between the African countries and the peoples of Africa. b. Defend the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of its member states. c. Accelerate the political and socio-economic integration of the continent. d. Promote and defend African common positions on issues of interest to the continent and its peoples. e. Encourage international cooperation, taking due account of the Charter of the United Nations and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. f. Promote peace, security, and stability on the continent. g. Promote democratic principles and institutions, popular participation, and good governance. h. Promote and protect human and people's rights in accordance with the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and other relevant human rights instruments, etc. See the AU Constitutive Act. From the above aims, it is clear that the AU, as stated in the preamble to its charter, is determined to take up the multifaceted challenges that confront the continent and peoples in light of the social, economic, and political changes taking place in the world. In order to achieve the stated aims, the member states of the AU resolved to adhere to the principles stated in Article 4 of the Constitutive Act. They include A. Sovereign equality and interdependence among member states of the Union. B. Respect of borders existing on achievement of independence. C. Participation of the African peoples in the activities of the Union. D. Establishment of a common defense policy for the African continent. E. Peaceful resolution of conflicts among member states of the Union through such appropriate means as may be decided upon by the Assembly. F. Prohibition of the use of force or threat to use force among member states of the Union. G. Non-interference by any member state in the internal affairs of another. H. The right of the Union to intervene in a member state pursuant to a decision of the Assembly in respect of grave circumstances, namely war crimes, genocide, and crimes against humanity. I. Peaceful coexistence of member states and their right to live in peace and security. J. The right of member states to request intervention from the Union in order to restore peace and security. See the AU Constitutive Act. African Union at 50. Will the dream of unity ever be realized? In his famous speech, in which he made the case for the formation of a strong union of the continent, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, described as the great crusader of African unity by Mwalimu Julius Nyerere on the 25th of May, 1963 in Addis Ababa, that unite we must. Without necessarily sacrificing our sovereignties, big or small, we can here and now forge a political union based on defense, foreign affairs and diplomacy, and a common citizenship, an African currency, an African monetary zone, and an African central bank. He went on, we must unite in order to achieve the full liberation of our continent. We need a common defense system with African High Command to ensure the stability and security of Africa. We will be mocking the hopes of our people if we show the slightest hesitation or delay in tackling realistically this question of African unity. 50 years on, the unification of Africa remains beyond the horizon. Excerpt called from Solomon Derso's article on African Union at 50, Will the Dream of Unity Ever Be Realized? In-text questions. 1. From the above speech, Kwame Nkrumah was campaigning for the establishment of A. African Union, B. ECOWAS, C. OAU, D. ECOMOG. 2. The African High Command, which Kwame Nkrumah advocated for, was reflected more in the defunct OAU than in the AU. A. True. B. False. Feedbacks on the in-text questions. 1. The correct answer is C. If you chose option A, B, or D, then you are incorrect, because from the above speech, Kwame Nkrumah was advocating for the creation of an international association of African states, where issues such as conflicts, poverty, security within the African region can be handled collectively. 2. The correct answer is false. If you chose true, then you are incorrect, because one of the major factors that led to the demise of the OAU is her inability to resolve conflicts or wars that pervade the continent. Thus, when the AU was formed, there was need to establish a strong defense unit for the Union. This culminated in the establishment of the Peace and Security Council. It is a collective security arrangement to facilitate timely and effective response to conflicts in the African continent. The constitutional structure of the AU. In order for the African Union to realize its set goals, it established 10 organs as stated in Article 5 of the Act. The Article 5 also empowered the Assembly of the Union to empower more organs as it may deem necessary. The organs are the Assembly of the Union, the Executive Council, the Pan-African Parliament, the Court of Justice, the Commission, the Permanent Representative Committee, the Specialized Technical Committee, the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, and the financial institutions. Moreover, the Peace and Security Council was later established in 2004 under a protocol to Constitutive Act adopted by the AU Assembly in July 2002. It is expedient for you to know their composition, powers, and functions, among others. The Assembly of the Union. This is the supreme organ of the AU. It is made up of heads of state and government, or their duly accredited representatives of member states. It meets once a year, but can meet in an extraordinary session at the request of a member state and approved by 2/3 majority of member states. Each member has one vote. All resolutions are passed by 2/3 majority. The Assembly discusses matters of common interest to Africa with a view to harmonizing the policy of the AU. It is charged with responsibility of reviewing the structure, functions, and acts of all organs of the AU, determining policies of the Union and monitoring its implementation, appointment and dismissal of judges, chairman of commission and deputy, and commissioners of the commission. Article 6, Section 4 made provision for the office of the chairman of the Assembly, who holds office for a period of 1 year. The Executive Council. The Executive Council comprises foreign ministers who advise and prepare decisions for the Assembly. The Executive Council is in charge of harmonizing decisions in areas that are of mutual interest to member states. See Article 13 of the Constitutive Act for the list of common interests in which the Council supervises. The Pan-African Parliament. Article 17, Section 1 establishes the Pan-African Parliament located in Midrand, South Africa, and it is currently made up of 265 members. It was established to ensure the full participation of the African peoples in the development and economic integration of the continent. The Pan-African Parliament is regarded as the highest legislative organ, even though its powers are largely consultative and advisory. However, these parliamentarians are not directly elected by the people of AU countries. Rather, they are selected by the national parliaments of AU member states. African Court of Justice and Human Rights. Article 18 of the Constitutive Act provides for a court of justice to adjudicate on disputes involving member states. In 2003, a protocol that saw the emergence of a court of justice was adopted. However, it has been overridden by the protocol creating the African Court of Justice and Human Rights, which will be integrated with the African Court of Human and People's Rights. It is stated in the protocol that the African Court on Human and People's Rights, established by the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the establishment of an African Court on Human and People's Rights, and the Court of Justice of the African Union, established by the Consultative Act of the African Union, are hereby merged into a single court and established as the African Court of Justice and Human Rights. See Protocol on the SAC-JHR 2008. It comprises two chambers, one chamber representing general legal matters and the other for rulings on the human rights treaties. The Commission. The Commission is the Secretariat of the Union. It is the body responsible for the administrative matters of the African Union. It is composed of a chairman and his or her deputy, and who is assisted by staff. Specialized Technical Committees. Article 14 of the Constitutive Act makes provision for specialized technical committees. It is made up of African ministers responsible to the Executive Council. The committees will be responsible for preparation, supervision, and coordination of projects on areas such as rural economy and agricultural matters, monetary and financial affairs, trade, customs and immigration, industry, science and technology, energy, natural resources and environment, transport, communications and tourism, health, labor and social affairs, education, culture and human resources. The Permanent Representatives Committee. Article 21 of the Constitutive Act makes provision for the Permanent Representative Committee. This committee is made up of ambassadors of AU member states. They are charged with the responsibility of assisting the Executive Council. The Permanent Representative Committee is responsible for the AU day-to-day relationship with member countries. It liaises with the administrative arm of the AU Commission. The Economic, Social and Cultural Council, ECOSOC. Article 23 of the Constitutive Act of the African Union created the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, which is regarded as a civil society group. It acts as an advisory organ to the Assembly. The Council is made up of 10 commissioners. A chairperson is elected for a period of 4 years. Financial institutions. Article 19 of the Constitutive Act makes provision for the establishment of 3 financial institutions, such as African Central Bank, African Investment Bank, African Monetary Fund. However, these institutions are yet to be created. Although the Union has commissioned a steering committee working to ensure that these financial institutions are established. Part of the AU's financial plan, the establishment of a single African currency. Peace and Security Council, PSC. On the 26th of December 2003, majority of the members of the AU ratified a protocol which saw the establishment of the Peace and Security Council, PSC, of the African Union. This followed the fourth ordinary session of the Executive Council held in Addis Ababa in March 2004, which also saw the election of 15 members of the PSC and the adoption of the rules of procedure of the new organ. AU 2004. Of the 15 members, 5 are elected to 3-year terms and 10 to 2-year terms. Countries are immediately re-eligible upon the expiration of their terms. The protocol defines the PSC is in charge of enforcing union decisions. It is patterned after the United Nations Security Council. It is a collective security arrangement to facilitate timely and effective response to conflict in the continent. As stated in the protocol, PSC is also charged with the responsibility of prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts, post-conflict peace building, and developing common defense policies. Challenges of the African Union. The challenges facing the African Union are diverse. It ranges from political, economic, and challenges in security and globalization. Political. One of the challenges facing the AU is bad leadership and governance, which is as a result of the manner in which the leaders were elected. Makinde and Okunu 2008 posited that the heads of states and government that make up the Assembly of the Union comprises tyrants who govern their countries like their personal fiefdoms and are not prepared to surrender their powers democratically. There is also the problem of bad governance. Most leaders that make up the AU lack clear purpose of leadership. There is a dichotomy between leaders and their people. This is owing to the fact that states in Africa deviated from their aims of serving to improve the socio-economic welfare of the people into mechanisms of wealth accumulation. There is lack of instruments, transparency, or accountability and dependable institutions needed for development. Corruption has become the bane of governance in Africa and has stunted the growth of the continent. ECA report on African governance in October 2009, Africa witnessed economic growth of 5.5%. However, this did not reflect in the standard of living of the people as a result of the corrupt practices of leaders on the continent. Olayinka 2009. This is a major factor that is responsible for the myriad of problems that has impinged on the Union to achieve its objectives of socio-economic and political development of the continent. Economic. One basic challenge facing the AU in realizing the economic growth and development for the continent is the fact that the Union is made up of majorly developing countries. Most African states are economically deficient as a result of lack of adequate infrastructure, such as industries needed for rapid growth, weak agriculture, inability to control export prices, highly indebted to developed countries, poor health services, etc. The AU has, however, strived to improve the African economy by creating close economic ties among countries in the continent, reducing barriers to trade and movement of goods across borders within states. The African Union further established the new Partnership for African Development (NEPAD), Badejo 2008, where African leaders were encouraged to work harder to mobilize more resources from within the continent to transform the economy of their countries. However, despite all these laudable policies, most African states continue to depend on aids and loans from developed countries to run their government and are barely able to finance developmental projects within their countries, let alone funding AU developmental projects. Security. One central aim of the AU is to effectively maintain political stability within the continent through the promotion of peace and security as a precondition for socio-economic and political development. However, the continent is faced with diverse forms of political violence. The cyclical nature of these wars has far-reaching corollary on developmental policies within the continent. More importantly, AU lacks human and material resources to mobilize troops in peacekeeping operations. The Union still overdepends on foreign assistance to implement its peacekeeping objectives. While pledges for support of AMIS were pouring in from the US, Canada, Australia, EU, and Japan and China, pledges from African countries were negligible, with Botswana categorically stating that it was not ready to send troops. The absence of financial support has severely undermined the ability of the AU missions to function effectively, and once deployed, the troops have difficulties in command and control, logistics and resupply. Makinde and Okunu, 2008. The inability of the AU to effectively maintain peace and security within the continent is a major security challenge which has economic implications. That is, the continent is made unattractive to foreign investment. Globalization. Another challenge facing the AU is the ability to embrace globalization and domesticate and exploit it for the positive transformation of the various sectors of the continent, particularly in areas such as healthcare services, agriculture, transport, knowledge and critical infrastructure. Makinde, Okunu, 2008. Moreover, African leaders have not been able to exploit the opportunities of globalization for economic and political rejuvenation of the continent. This globalization has become a challenge. That is, by prolonging Africa's access to foreign finance capital and artifacts of advanced technology, it impedes on the development of capital and technological prowess, and by granting foreign powers easier access to intervene in crises within the continent, it obstructs development in political responsibility and transparency. Therefore, in the case of Africa, the forces of globalization retard the logic of development. Ogidi, 2010. Constitutive Act sets out to codify framework under which the African Union is to conduct itself. Globalization. This can be defined as a process of international integration arising from the interchange of world view in relation to all human activities. Study session summary. In this study session, you learned that the defunct OAU failed to achieve its objectives, which led to the formation of the AU on the 9th of July 2002. The framers of the Constitutive Act of the Union were careful to avoid the mistakes of the past and thus incorporated the interventionist posture of its Constitutive Act. The AU was formed to achieve greater unity and solidarity between the African countries and the peoples of Africa. You also learnt that the AU has 10 principal organs. These include the Assembly of the Union, the Executive Council, the Pan-African Parliament, the Court of Justice, the Commission, the Permanent Representative Committee, the Specialized Technical Committees, the Economic, Social and Cultural Council, and the Financial Institutions. The Peace and Security Council was later established in 2004. The AU has political, economic and security challenges. The AU is also unable to exploit the benefits of globalization in transforming Africa. End of study session 4. Thank you for listening.